I just lost the camera. Okay, got it back. Zog to Gemara. Meisvei. Hakoshev Sefer Torah. I'm sorry. Idach. There was two halachas that we said that Rav told us that we had a tiyufta from a brisa. So this is the second halacha. The first halacha was if there's 4 pages that have mistakes on them. There's 4 pages that have mistakes on them, then you can't correct it. Now, how many pages do we say? It has to have that you can't correct it. I think it's 4 pages, no? No, b'chol daf adaf. No, I'm sorry. If every page has 4 mistakes, then it cannot be corrected. But if one page doesn't, then you could correct it. Idach, the Amarav, HaKoshev Sefer Torah, Ubal Ligmor. So you're at the last words of the Torah, La'inei Kol Yisrael, Goymer v'afilu b'emtza daf. You don't have to fill the whole page to the bottom. You could finish wherever you finish. Meisvei. On that we have a kasha. HaKoshev Sefer Torah, Ba lo ligmar, lo yigmar be'emtza daf. You're not allowed to finish the middle of the page. K'derech shegomer b'chamoshim. Like you would finish if you weren't writing a Sefer Torah, you're just writing an individual chumash to learn from. Ella, what do? Mekatzer v'holech. You reduce the amount of words on each page so that the configuration of your writing is like a funnel. You reduce the words on the page on each row so that you stretch it out at soif hadaf. So that's a stira. Do you have to finish b'soif hadaf or not? Dr. Gemara, Kik Omer Rav is b'chumshin. Rav only said that you don't have to end at the end of the daf by chumoshim, but not by a Sefer Torah. Fragt Gemara about Sefer Torah Kamar. Amar Rav HaKoshev Sefer Torah. So how could you say he's not speaking about a Sefer Torah? Dr. Gemara, b'chumshin shel Sefer Torah. So when you finish off each of the 4 chumoshim, Bereishis Shemosh v'Yikra b'Midbar, there you could end even in the middle of the daf. But if you're talking about the La'inei Kol Yisrael, the last words of the Torah and Dosa Bracha, that has to be finished by the end of the daf. Fragt Gemara, that's all. Amar Rabbi Shua Bar Abba, Amar Rav Gidel, Amar Rav, La'inei Kol Yisrael be'emtza daf. He said it could be be'emtza daf. So Gemara, Ahu be'emtza shita itmar. That doesn't mean that you can finish the middle of the page. You have to extend the writing all the way down to the bottom of the page. But you can finish in the middle of a line. You don't have to fill up the whole line. Rabbanan Amri, Af be'emtza shita. You need both. You could have both. You could finish in the middle of the page, and you could finish in the middle of the line. Rabbi Ashi Amar, be'emtza shita dafka, but not in the middle of the page. Ve'hilchazah be'emtza shita dafka. You can finish in the middle of the line, but you cannot finish in the middle of the page.
Rashi is saying you should. You have to.
I'm sorry?
Rashi is saying specifically you have to end in the middle of the line. Not that you could.
So let's see Rashi. Be'emtza shita dafka, v'loi be'emtza hadaf. That's dafka. Dafka you could finish be'emtza shita, but the dafka is that you cannot finish be'emtza hadaf. The article says you have to be dafka finish in the middle, or it just means it's dafka be'emtza.
Includes the Torah specifically in the middle of the line.
Are you supposed to finish in the middle of the line? Because I'm looking at Rashi over here. Rashi says be'emtza shita dafka. Dafka means dafka shita, not daf.
Rashi holds the opposite. Permit to finish in the middle of the column would be a greater novelty.
Right, so it's greater novelty to finish in the middle of the column. Meaning you have to finish. So ab be'emtza shita means be'emtza daf, but the hilchos of be'emtza shita dafka means v'loi be'emtza daf. So the chiddush is that you could finish in the middle of a line, but you can't finish in the middle of a page. Okay, zog to Gemara weiter. There's a whole machlokes we're showing about it. Amar Rabbi Shua Bar Abba, Amar Rav Gidel, Amar Rav. Shmoina psukim sheb'Torah. There are the last 8 psukim of the Torah, which talks about the Misa of Moshe Rabbeinu, Yachid Korah Eishtam Beis HaKnesses. There's a multi-way machlokes what this means. Rashi means it has to all be learned by one person. You can't split it up. But there are those who learn that it has to be the same person that's learning the rest of the Torah. There are those who learn it has to be a different person that learns the rest of the Torah. There are those who learn that if you get an aliyah, in the olden days it used to work where if you got an aliyah, you learned the Torah yourself. But the rest of the Torah, you can have the Valkyrie help you. But that last aliyah, you have to learn by yourself. So there's multiple pshatim in what this means. Whatever the case is, the last 8 psukim are distinct, and we're going to see why. Zog to Gemara, command the like Rab Shimon the Tanya. Vayom Hashem Moshe Eved Hashem. So how could Moshe write it if he's writing about his death? Efshir Moshe Chai v'chosav vayom Hashem Moshe Ela Atkan Chosav Moshe. This, up until this point in the Torah, must have been written by Moshe. Mikan ve'elech Chosav Yeshua ben Nun. The last 8 psukim of the Torah were written by Yeshua ben Nun. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. V'amri la Rab Nechemia or Rab Nechemia. Amar la Rab Shimon. How could it be? After Sefer Torah Chayser Osachas. When Moshe Rabbeinu died, are you telling me that the Torah was not yet complete? Uksiv, but yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, L'koyach HaSefer HaTorah Zeh V'sabta Moshe. But it's not a Sefer Torah yet. It was missing 8 psukim because Moshe had not yet written them. Ella, what it must mean is, Ad kan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer U'Moshe Kosev Ve'Omer. Up until this point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu dictated, and Moshe spoke out the word loud and also wrote it. Mikan ve'elech, but for the last 8 psukim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer, HaKadosh Baruch Hu dictated, U'Moshe Kosev, but didn't Omer. And he also didn't write it with ink, he wrote it b'dema. He wrote it with tears. K'moshe Nemer L'halon, V'yomer Lahem, it says by the Navi, when by the Navi Yirmiyahu, who was told to write something very sad about the Churban Bayis, V'yomer Baruch mipiv yikorei elai as kol advarim ha'ela, v'ani koshev al sefer b'dayoi, but I won't repeat the words. We're going to talk soon about a sefer has to read the word as he writes it. So it seems like this doesn't stick with Reb Shimon because Reb Shimon said that Yeshua wrote it. Verkehrt. It's mashma that the Braysh of Yomas Moshe Hashem. I'm sorry. Shmoyim Psukim Shabbatai Yochid Kairoson command like Reb Shimon because according to Reb Shimon, he did write it. According to Reb Shimon, Moshe did write it. So the 8 psukim, the 8 last psukim should be like any other person. The fact is, there's a difference in the distinction between these 8 psukim and the rest of the Torah, so it still makes sense to say that it should be written differently. So,
what could it possibly mean that it was written with his tears? Okay.
That's what I want to talk about. So the Mefarshim say a very gewaltige word. What do you mean Moshe wrote it with tears? Right? What type of writing is that with tears? So the Mefarshim say that bedema does not mean tears. Bedema means with confusion. Now we know that there are many different ways to split up the sequence of letters in the Torah to get different results. And our Torah, we have the Kabbalah how the letters have to be split up. But we know, like in the Bible codes, when they look through to find different sequences, it's not necessarily splitting up the words in this. You know what the Bible codes are? They make a cylinder, right? So there's so many different ways to split up the words, or to split up the letters of the Torah that could form different words that are all part of the Sodus of Torah. So what happened is HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the information to Moshe. He just dictated the letters, but he didn't split it up according to the words. So although Moshe wrote the whole Torah, but it was bedema, it wasn't with the words split up properly, it was just that sequence of letters, and he didn't know how those words would be split up. It's only Yeshua who got the Messiah of how to split up those letters. That's what the Mefarshim say. So now it makes a lot more sense. And now it's not a stira anymore. Right, from Vayamos. And now it's not a stira anymore. Moshe wrote it and Yeshua wrote it. because Moshe wrote the letter, and Yeshua split them up so that they should form the words as we have them today. Okay, let's have a quick look at Tosfos. Shmoyne psukim elu yochid koraison. Harav Meshulam hayim afarish l'mutei shelo yikar shliach tzibur imoy. Unlike Rashi, who Rashi says you have to read them all together, Rabbi Meshulam learned that the Balkar wouldn't lane it with you. The person who got to Aliyah, whoever got Chos and Torah had to know how to lane. So Borman was out of his job because the Oiler got to Aliyah himself. Because Shalom Rabbeinu Tam, the Bimei Chachamim lo haya regila sheyisayeya shliach tzibur l'kar b'Torah. In those days, the person who got to Aliyah always laid. Kedemuchach beperek sheni de Megillah. Darmina karur shnayim yotzuma she'enkein b'Torah. Ela kein iker kamo shepirish b'kudris zaktoisus I like Rashi's pshat la'fukei shleikru zeh chezer oitom ches psuchim. It shouldn't be split up. Going zeh dalad v'zeh dalad. I'm sorry.
How many times does Tosfos say that? Shas?
Say what?
Like,
Rashi's pshat.
yeah.
So he says this once in a while. Oizeh v'zeh gimel. It was his grandfather. Umashonei hagen achshav shemisayeya. Shliach tzibur l'kar b'Torah. Now that we have a Bakari nowadays, Kedei Shalei Levayish, Shmi She'einu Yidea, Likrais, really anybody who doesn't know how to lane should be ashamed of himself. How could you not know how to lane? So, because there's enough people who don't, and we don't do the Vayishim, so we have a Bakari who also doesn't know how to lane. Who has a Bakari who lanes so that we don't have to suffer the embarrassment. Ke'inin Shemetinu B'Sechas Bikurim, Sheskinu Shemakrim Esakoil, because the women who were nidas were embarrassed because they knew that by their levias it would be obvious. Okay. There's a famous Ber Zolti who asks, we know by a chosin and we know by bar mitzvah we sing in Kadesh Levias Shemish Eini Yachol. So how come we don't have it by your Rav? When the Rav speaks, you should sing in Kadesh Levias Shemish Eini Yachol. So it's a very Zolti. I don't know if it's finished. Darf mit dem Yom lassen an. Okay, next places. Become the Chos of Yehoshua. Mashenhagen Loimar Tzidu Kadin b'Shabbos b'Mincha. Why do we say Tzidkoscha? Right? We say Tzidkoscha b'Mincha. Does anyone ever wonder where that minhag comes from? Zokt Rabbi Shulam, Zokt Rabbi Shpirish, Rav Sar Shalom Goyim, Al Shenifter Moshe Rabbeinu ba'Yisrael. Because Moshe Rabbeinu was Nifter Shabbos afternoon. That's why we don't learn Torah. I'm not sure why the Lubavitchers Bedavke are Isaac B'Torah during Shalosh Shulas, right? Mishum Damina and Chacham Shemeis Kol Batim Midrashay Shabeir B'Tel. Zaktos is V'Kasha. I don't think it's possible that Moshe Rabbeinu died Shabbos afternoon. Taksiv Ben Me'ah Be'esem Shana Anochi Hayom. I'm 120 days today, meaning 120 years today, between Moshe Rabbeinu says he died on his birthday. Udashini la yoim malu yimei shenoisai. Vim b'Shabbos meis im kain kosef hayoim me'erev Shabbos. He must have written those words erev Shabbos because he couldn't have written the Torah on Shabbos. V'yesh l'tameya because of ala osid. And it's fair to say that he would have written it on Friday, referring to tomorrow. Today wasn't his birthday. Uli Rab Shimon lo'bei l'meimar the pasuk nemar ala osid. You can't say that the pasuk is referring to the future. So once again, Moshe Rabbeinu had to have a complete Torah. Maybe because Yeshua was going to finish it. The Beseder Olam Mashma, and here's an interesting cheshbon. The Beshiva Ba'adar Shemeis Moshe Boy Erev Shabbos Haya. In Seder Olam, it's mashma that it was a Friday, the day that Moshe Rabbeinu died. The Katani, it says the Achar Pesach, after Pesach, be'eser mushnayim on the 22nd day of Nisan, Seivavu Esair. That's when they surrounded Jericho. Kolanche al Mochama Hakev Pa'amachas. It says Vayibiyam Hashvi Vayashkimu Baboker. Rabbi Yosy Omer Yom Shabbos Hoya. The day that they surrounded Jericho was on Shabbos. So if you work the dates backwards, if the seventh day was a Friday, which was the 22nd day of Nisan. So the first day, I guess. And it was 7 days after Moshe died. It was after his Shiva, because right after his Shiva, Yeshua led them in to tackle Yericho. Imkein Yom Shvi, Shahaya Shabbos, Chav Ches B'Nisan, which means the 7th day of Shiva was Chav Ches Nisan. The Chav Ches B'Nisan is Shabbos, and you work your way backwards. Shiva Ba'adar must have been Erev Shabbos. If you look at a calendar, that's how it would work out. So in fact, Moshe Rabbeinu, Zaptosus could not have done on Shabbos, he must have done on Erev Shabbos. Umoshe Kosef, Yesh Shvarim Degasi, Umoshe Omer V'Kosef. V'chumri, L'Kosvei Sefer Torah, Umezuzu Tefillin, it's a chumrah for people who are writing Kisvei Kodesh to speak out the words as he writes them. Avagav D'Maisi Raya, Mi Baruch, which is the Sefer by Yirmiyahu, Shemagam Hu Haya Oisa Kain, maybe he also spoke out the words, even though the pasuk seems to say he just wrote and he wasn't Omer. V'kuntis Nami Garis Omer V'Kosev, Upirish Tam, V'zal Shainai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer U'Moshe Omer Acharav, Kedei Shelo Yiteh B'Ksav. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu speak out the words? To make sure that he would be writing it accurately. If you speak it out, you're focusing on it and you'll write it clearly. Why? Moshe, the last 8 words of the Torah were difficult for Moshe to write, so he didn't speak out the words. Again, by Yirmiyahu, it was Kinnis that was being written, so he didn't want to actually repeat the words. Our meaning is that the Sefer does speak out every word before he writes it to make sure that he's focused. Okay, Zog to Gemara weiter. Rabbi Shua bar Abba, Rav Gidol Rav, Halakeach Sefer Torah min hashuk. If you don't write a Sefer Torah, you just buy a completed Sefer Torah, it's kechaytev mitzvah min hashuk. It's like yichapa mitzvah. It's not the mitzvah min hamocha. Katzva, if you write a Sefer Torah, then ma'ila of akasav kilo kibla min har Sinai. So there's a big difference between buying a Sefer Torah off the shelf versus having a Sefer write a Sefer Torah for you. Amar Rav Sheshes, but im higia afilo isachas, if there's even one letter that you have to fix up, and we know the Sefer never finished the Sefer Torah, so therefore, ma'ila olav kilo kasvei. So nowadays, to buy an existing Sefer Torah from somebody, that's not such a mitzvah. The main mitzvah is to write a Sefer Torah or buy a Sefer Torah that needs to be renovated. That's the big mitzvah. Tanaban, Oisa Adam Uriah Mibas Shalosh Dafin Yad Bas Shmoyne Dafin. We know the Sefer Torah is comprised of multiple sheets that are sewn together. So the minimum size of a sheet should have 3 columns, and the maximum that it should have is 8 columns, because we don't want the seams to be too close together, it doesn't look nice, and we don't want the seams to be too far apart. So it should be between 3 and 8 columns. Pachas mekain v'yesha kain lo yasa, and v'lo yaber b'dafin, don't squeeze in more columns, so you should have the minimum of 3 by making very narrow columns. So it looks like an igeris. It's not nice for Ksiva Sefer Torah to have very narrow columns. And don't make very long lines and have less columns. When you're going from the end of one line back to the beginning of the next line, you could get mixed up. Ella, you know how long ideally a column should be? It should be the amount of space it requires to write Lemishpechaseichem Gimel Pamim. That's the ideal width of a column. What if you have a Uriah that has 9 dafin, which means it's past the maximum of 8? So the way you should split it up is Lo yachlek shalosh lakan v'sheish lakan. Don't split it up to 6 and 3. So that each one is within the proper limits. This only applies at the beginning of the Sefer, meaning anywhere throughout the Sefer as well. except for the last daf, Aval b'soifa sefer, but if it's at the end of the sefer, afilu pasuk echad, v'afilu daf echad. Even one pasuk or even one column is acceptable on that last Uriah. Pasuk echad, so kadaitach. Are you really saying that you should have one pasuk on the entire page? That's not mistaber. Ema pasuk echad b'daf echad. It means pasuk echad b'daf echad. So let's see Rashi. You can spread out that one pasuk across the entire Uriah. So the Gemara says that's very difficult to say. So therefore, you could spread out a whole pasuk to one column. Oh, so forget it. It's saying that you could even make one big column and you should go across the whole Uriah. Right. So you have to spread out a pasuk. So what I don't have clear is, what's the Gemara asking? Afilu pasuk echad, afilu daf echad. So the Gemara asks, pasuk echad tzol kedaitach. I don't understand what's fair. How does he explain?
How can one write only one pasuk explaining the width of the column?
Why not? Spread it out, make very big letters.
Doesn't have to do it this way. You have to do it this way. It has to be at the end of the thing.
Oh, so the problem is not a width issue; it's a length issue.
Right.
So Dr. Gemara, that's what it means. You could even have one word on a line and stretch it out so that it should reach the bottom of the line. Okay. Shir Gilya Milamata. How much empty space has to be at the bottom of the page? Tefach. Milamaila at the top of the page. Gimel Atzbois. Uvei daf al daf, and between each column, Kemola Revach Rechev Shtei Atzbois, the width of 2 fingers. Uvechumshin, and when you're at the end of a chumash, Milamato Shalosh Atzbois, and Milamala Shtei Atzbois. Uvei daf, Uvechumshin means if you're writing an individual chumash. If you're writing an individual chumash, there's less space that has to be left. So less than 2 fingers, but larger than 1 finger. Between lines, you have to have one blank line in between each line of writing. Between each word, there should be a pause of 1 letter. What if you have a problem where the 2 lines are too close together, you didn't leave a full line in between. So don't, because of that, write the words on the line very small. So the sirt was done incorrectly where the space in between 2 lines was too little. So don't just write a smaller font. To leave more space above and below so that you have your line space of blank in between. And also not so that you can have space in between your lines. So whenever you need to leave the minimum amount and you didn't, don't compensate by writing the letters very tiny. What if you had a word that was 5 letters, but you couldn't fit the whole thing at the end of your line? Don't squeeze 2 into the column and then and let 3 letters stick out into the aisle. Don't do that. Rather, the maximum that you're allowed to have sticking out of the daf is 2. And there's a discussion. Does that just mean roib should be inside? So if I had a word with 7 letters, it's 4 and 3? It seems like 2 is the maximum that should be out in the aisle. So it's not roiv, it's a maximum of 2. What if you had a word that only had 2 letters in it, like the word S? Don't push it out into the aisle. So at the end of the day, you have to have write the word in the aisle, in the column, and the maximum you can have Even if some is sticking out, it's two. Go to the beginning of the next line. Hataya b'Shem. What if you forgot to write Shem Hashem, and you wrote the next letter from the next word? So what do? Goyrer es masha kasav. You scrape away, you wait till the ink dries, you scrape away the wrong letter, and now you could write the Shem Hashem there. The problem is, that letter, what are you going to do with it? You need a letter for the last word. So what do? V'toila es mashagorar. You write the letter that you have to move out of the way down below the line. V'chaysev es Hashem al mokam agrar. Where do you write Shem Hashem? Dafka on the line. You can't write Hashem below the line, slip it in like you might do for another letter. Shem Hashem will have to be where you scraped it away. Now, scraping away after ink dries is the best way to get a clean cloth, or as best as possible once that happens. Wiping it away when it's wet wouldn't take it away so much, and there would still be an impression. So the cleanest way is to scrape it away after it dries. Rabbi Yosy Omer, Af Tolan es Hashem. No, you can even write the Shem below the line.
He keeps on saying above the line.
Tolan is to right above? Okay, above the line. Okay, thank you. Rabbi Yitzchak Omer, Rabbi Yitzchak said, Tola magia bein hashitin. So it Rashi's bein hashitin, but the Art Scroll assumes it means above, not below. Okay. Rabbi Yitzchak Omer, Af moichik v'kaisef. You don't even have to wait till it dries. You can actually just rub away the wet ink and write, and that doesn't get you as nice as a clean cloth. That's why it's af moichik. You could even be moichik. The shaila is moichik worse than toilen, or is moichik just worse than goyrer, but toilen is the worst? And that's a little bit of a shaila in the Rishonim. Reb Shimon Shazuri Eimer, Kol Hashem Kuloi Toilen. You could put the whole Shem in between the lines, but Miktsasi and Toilen. You can't put part of the Shem in between the lines. Reb Shimon Ben Elazar Eimer, Yishum Reb Meir, Ein Koshvin Hashem, Lo Al Mokem Agrar. You know, all the Mokem Hashem where you scraped off lines, V'lo Al Mokem HaMechik, and not where you wiped away wet ink. Vein Toilen say. So what are you supposed to do? Ketzad Oiseh, Misalik es a Yuriya Kula Begoinza. If you didn't leave space for Shem Hashem, no erasing. You lost that Yuriya, and you got to start over again. Itmar Chanano Amarav Halacha Toilen is Hashem. You are allowed to put it in between the lines. Rabbi Bar Chanano Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Halacha Moichik V'Koisev. Frek the Gemara V'Lei Mamar Halacha Kamar Umar Halacha Kamar. Why did they speak out what they paskin? They should have just said who they're paskening like. So because there are those who attribute a different psak to a different Tana, so to be sure that they're paskening and what they're paskening comes out clear, they didn't refer just to the halacha as like so and so, they actually repeated what the halacha is. Amar Ravin Bar Chinina, Amar Ula, Amar Rab Chanina, halacha Rab Shimon Shazuri. He passed like Rab Shimon Shazuri that you got to start over again. V'lo right, ala kol makom sheshona Rab Shimon Shazuri, halacha kamoisei. So Ahaya, in what halacha was Ravin Bar Chinina paskening like Rab Shimon Shazuri? Is it our case over here that you made a mistake with the Shem Hashem, you got to start the whole paper over again? It doesn't make sense. Because we had a discussion of Amayim, who we paskin like. And we had, I'm sorry? Thank you. I went to Allah. Amar Chanano, Amar Rav, Allah Torah Hashem. V'Rabbi Bar Chanano, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel, Allah Moichik V'Goysev. V'Misa, if Rab Chanina here is paskening like Rab Shimon Shazuri, he should have gotten into that conversation, and he said, no, I pasken like Rab Shimon Shazuri. V'Misa, Hu Nami Lema, he should have said it in this conversation. I guess the assumption is he was there by that conversation. Elaha, when he said halacha Kashim ben Shazuri, he must be referring to a different halacha that Rab Shimon Shazuri said. Rab Shimon Shazuri Omer, Afil ben Chamesh Shanim, even if you have a ben pekua, so a ben pekua was nita b'shchita simai. Now it's born and it's an animal and it's working in the fields. The chayish besada still shchitas imay mitarosai you don't have to shechted. You can just shoot the animal and eat it because it already had a shechita while it was in its mother's stomach. Itmar Allah is the iri amar Rab Chanina halacha k'Rab Shimon Shazuri. That's what he said. Halacha k'Shimon Shazuri. Fact no, because itmar Allah is the iri amar Rab Chanina halacha k'Rab Shimon Shazuri v'im Isa hu nami lema. He should have also said when Ziri said halacha Rab Shimon Shazuri. He should have said it as well. Rab Chanina should have said it as well, right? Amar Ulam Rab Chanina halacha Rab Shimon Shazuri. He should have said it together with Ziri. So it doesn't make sense that he's referring to that halacha either. If somebody was being taken to be killed by the Menachos, and he said, Kisvu get l'ishti, write a get for my wife, but he didn't say Kisvu tnu get l'ishti, which is normally how you're Mamala Shliach. They have authorization to write and to give. And we say the reason why he didn't speak it out is the guy's going to get killed. He's a little bit nervous. He might have missed to tell you that, but that's surely what he meant. Even if he's not been taken out to be killed, he's leaving on a long trip where again his life is risk. Even somebody who's very not well, who says that, it has the same halacha as if he said kisvutnu. So if that's what Reb Chanina was referring to when he said this is halacha like Reb Shimon ben Zuri, or inami aha trumas meiser shall demai, the trumas meiser of demai. So normally, if you buy from an amaret, it's demai, and we're not sure he took trumas and meisers. So therefore, if you're a mafresh meiser and then you're mafresh the trumas meiser from it, which you have to give to the kohen, otherwise it's all tevel. Shechazrim kohen. What if you had trumas meiser of demai and it fell back into the demai, right? So now it's like truma got mixed into chulin. So the whole thing is now going to become usher to you if you're not a kohen. So how do you fix this? Rab Shimon Shazuri Omer af b'choil shoyalei v'oichloi alpiv. You know what you can do? You bought this tula. You took ma'asher from it and you took trumas ma'asher from it because you weren't sure if the Amoritz took ma'ashers. Now you messed up because your trumas ma'asher, which has the din of truma, fell back into the ma'asher and now you can't eat it at all. So you can go back to the Amoritz that you bought it from and you can ask him, tell me the truth, did you take ma'asher? If he says yes, then your ma'asher and your trumas ma'asher has no validity because it was already chul. You already bought produce that was mesukah from him. So even though we force you to take ma'asher again, if a zoivite to save your whole granary that now has trumas ma'asher mixed into it, for that we'll trust him. So therefore, even b'chol. So once again, maybe that's the halacha of Rab Shimon ben Shazuri. Not Ben Shazuri, Rab Shimon Shazuri, that Rab Chanina was passing like. So if that's the case, then why didn't Rab Chanina say this in conjunction with Rabbi Yochanan? The reason it's referring to the same thing that Rabbi Yochanan was referring to. Who nami laima? Must be a different Rab Shimon Shazuri that Rab Chanina was talking about. Rabbi Yosy ben Kippur, Rab Shimon Shazuri. Pula mitri, you could plant it because you want to eat its seeds, or you could plant it because you want its vegetable. Vegetables, which year do we say it's from Lagabi, what type of ma'asher to take from it? Basar lakita. But if you're planting it for the seeds, that's a fruit, that would be basar the planting. So pula mitri shazara lezera, so you planted it as a fruit. Miktasei hishrish lifnei Rosh Hashanah, and therefore it would be part of the prior year. And now you're harvesting. How are you going to know which plant was from last year and which plant was this year? How do you know how to be ma'aser? So the halacha is ein Torah min mizalza. You're not allowed to take truma from the old and the new. So you can't. You're going to have a problem over here because you have to now separate based on which one was the hishrish before and after. How are you going to know that? So what do? You just mix it all together and you assume that there'll be an equal ratio of your trumas and ma'ashers from each crop. Yasa tzover I'm sorry, Ketzid Yasa, Torah Goyal Soichai, Venim to Torah Master, Min HaChodesh Shaboy, Umin HaYoshin Shaboy, HaYoshin Shaboy. Zok to me, that can either be Rab Shimon Shazuri. Because Ha'itmer La'amar Rab Shmuel Ben Nachmeni Rabbi Yochanan, Halacha Rab Shimon Shazuri, V'misa Hu Nami Leimo. He should have stuck it in there. So we cannot find a place where Rab Shimon Shazuri said halacha and no one else passing like him, so that Rab Chanina had to come out and passing like him. Amar Papa Ashida, it's referring to how you assess the size of a big box, because we know a very big box is not going to be able to be tamei. So how do you measure that box? Rab Nachman ben Yitzchak Amar Ayayin, it's referring to wine. Rab Papa said, Asheda, it's going on the box. The Tanan we learned. I mean, I will say this for tomorrow because we're running late already. We'll talk about this case of the box where there's a machlokes, how you measure a box to know if it's too big to be makabel tuba. I just want to talk a little bit about the ben pekul business. The Mishnah, we learned in Mishnah that if you have, Rabbi Shimon Shazuri said, if you had a ben pekul, even if it was 5 years old, and it's working in the field, it's a big, fully grown animal, you don't have to shecht it, you can just eat it. Do you know Rabbi Heinlein wanted to make a ben pekul farm? Because a ben pekua, do you know that if you have a ben pekua and it's a treifa, no problem. As long as the mother's not a treifa, there's no problem. So what he wanted to do is, he wanted to create a ben pekua farm, which means he would take a ben pekua male, ben pekua female, and create, and that means none of these animals would require shechita, none of these animals would have a problem of typhus, and it would bring the cost of kosher meat down tremendously, which was always Rabbi Heinman's goal, because we don't need shechita anymore, we don't need bedik anymore. What an unbelievable invention. You know why I didn't do it? What? You know what?
Right.
It wasn't the Shechtim's union. Because if one of these animals got out and mated with a non-ben pekua animal, each child wouldn't be able to have a heter shechita. Because the tzad ben pekua shaboy is not shechita material, and the tzad regular shaboy needs shechita. So it's possible you would have animals now that are unfixable, and that would be a bigger kilkul, because those would get proliferated, and then we would have problems.
Well, if somebody's been pulling the but it's...
The shechita is nothing. It's like taking a piece of meat and cutting it. So that's one of the main reasons why they didn't let it. But otherwise, it would have been an unbelievable way. I can't believe it's... Forget, I'll dry litvish halacha. It's not. It doesn't need to have shechita. There's no problem of treifas. But if it's felt a tatan, so essen Fleisch wie a goy. Weißt nicht. But that was the discussion. Punkt I was in